24 coisas que só os jogadores raízes de LOLzinho vão lembrar.
From Zyra's old ability that used to let her turn into a plant and shoot
É em inglês, gente, mas tem legenda aqui embaixo, tá? Então, por favor, acompanhem.
at people to the most OP and frustrating stat to ever exist in League of Legends. These are 24 things that only OG players will probably remember. Starting things off with Twisted Fate. Now, a lot of people don't know that Twisted Fate's cards back in the day weren't actually random. When Twisted Fate said,
just the luck of the draw,
that guy was lying straight to your face because the cards were actually set to an 116 beats per minute tempo, regardless if you could see them or not. I mean, just take a listen. This meant that if you were
Tinha isso mesmo, mas, mano, era só os monotef, muito monotef que conseguia abusar disso.
sweaty enough, you could actually set it up so you could keep track of which card you'd pick every time as long as you kept track of the beat. Back then, Zyra's passive
Tipo, eles
was
tiveram que mudar isso só porque era meio desleal, né? O cara, ele conseguia fazer... Ele conseguia, tipo, já apertar WW e ele já sabia a carta exatamente que ia vir porque ele ficava pensando nisso. Só que era só o cara que dedicava, sei lá quantas mil horas de TF conseguia fazer isso. Então, era meu pai.
called Rise of the Thorns, and it was actually similar to Kog'Maw or Sion's passive today. It allowed her to turn into a plant and shoot one final shot.
Mano, essa passiva da Zyra, que saudade, meu Deus!
Kog'Maw or
Mano,
Sion's
quem nunca deu E ult no cara, que usou tudo, aí se matou e ainda pegou a passiva na hora que a ult levantava?
passive today. It allowed her to turn into a plant and shoot one final shot in a straight line before dying. Unfortunately though, as we know, Riot eventually ended up changing her passive because I guess the people thought it was undesirable. Anyways, did you know
Por
that
que os caras, eles tiraram a passiva da Zyra e não tiraram do Kog? Sendo que o Kog é um AD Carry. Você quer estimular os AD Carries a fazer aquilo?
Alright, moving on to one of the most broken stats to have ever existed in League, we have Dodge. Now, for those who didn't play in or before Season 2...
Pra quem não jogou na Season 1, gente, e como ele falou, acho que na Season 2 chegou a ter também, tinha uma runinha, tipo, as runas você fazia naquela página antiga que a maioria lembra, né? Deixa eu ver. Essa runa aqui, tá ligado? E daí tinha um status, um atributo que era dodge, que é desvio, não sei como é que seria em português. E daí tinham bonecos que ganhavam esse atributo também no kit deles. Então o Zyra, eu lembro que na passiva ganhava isso, o Jax. E daí quando o Jax dava dodge, o E dele stanava e o E dele já dava dodge.
which was pretty
Ninja
much
Tab
all
dava
of us,
dodge.
there actually used to be a stat in the game called Dodge. Now, Dodge isn't something that we're all unfamiliar with today. After all, Jax still has this
E
feature
o Jax dava em torre, tá? Ele desviava de hit da torre.
on his E or Counter-Strike
Esquiva,
today. But the
esquiva,
difference
isso.
is, back then, Dodge was actually a buildable stat in the game alongside things like crit chance or AD or AP. This basically meant that you could actually increase your chances to dodge all basic attacks by just doing things like buying items, just like you would to increase crit chance today. In fact, a lot of you probably remember Ninja Tabbies or the armor boots of the old days, and even the
Tanto que o
boot
motivo pelo qual a Riot mudou o nome da Ninja Tab é porque eles falaram que era muito conectado à época que eles tinham dodge. Só que ninguém lembrava disso, tá ligado? Não tinha por que mudar. E hoje em dia é botas galvanizadas de aço.
back then actually granted you 12% dodge chance alone. Phantom Dancer also gave you a 20%
Meu
dodge
Deus.
chance. Additionally, the old rune system was still in the game as well, and you could even use specific runes to increase your dodge chances even further. On top of that, some champions, most notably Jax, also had even more dodge built into their kit, and in the old Jax's case, his passive actually used to be Counter-Strike, which just gave him up to another 18% dodge in the game. In the late game, Jax could get up to over a 60% dodge, making him basically unkillable. And to put things into perspective, he was so busted that not even your fountain would be able
Teve
to
alguém aí que jogou nessa época, gente? Fala eu.
save you at times. Also, in this case, Tryndamere was probably the worst champion you could possibly play into him. Now, it wasn't completely hopeless, as there was an item in the game called Sword of the Divine to help counter it, which would temporarily eliminate any dodge chance. But even then, it was still a pretty lost cause. Needless to say that the old dodge will always go down in League of Legends history. Did you know that the old Rengar used to be a menace for many different reasons, but one in particular was his ability to use his ultimate and go invisible without you being able to see him no matter how close he got to you. Rengar has always been a nightmare and even still is today.
E ele tava usando aquele item que ele mostrou lá, a espada do divino, que garantia que ele ia critar nos próximos hits, uma parada assim, e também não tinha como dar dodge.
Squishy champions, but the difference is today we can actually see him a bit, at least when he gets nearby or in the area. But back then, you pretty much had a 0% 50% chance of spotting him before he
Era
jumped on you and one-shot you. Seems fair, right? Additionally, the actual sound and roar he made was also a bit more terrifying than what it is today. Speaking of old champions, a lot of people don't remember old Nidalee either. If you think Nidalee's spears do a crap ton of damage today, they were even more ridiculous back then. Because in the old days, there was a point where at the max range...
Lembra, velho, jogar de Nidalee top AP fazendo bastão das Zyras? Ai, que delícia.
Her AP ratio was multiplied by 3, meaning even if she was behind, it didn't really matter. As long as you hit a single spear, you could still one-shot people. Also, speaking of Nidalee...
Não tinha essa mecânica de você acertar a lança e ter que ir pra cima do cara. Não, mano, você acertava a lança, dava muito mais dano e depois tacava outra lança.
A lot of people don't remember her old splash arts either, as well as the fact that she used to have a hidden passive where nearby allies actually gained 5 bonus XP every 5 seconds if Nidalee was a higher level. Basically poking fun at the term cougar. Oh yeah, and let's not forget about how tanky Nidalee was back in the day too.
Nah, fuck that shit, man. He's too tanky.
Oh, expect it.
Another champion that only old people will remember is the old Soraka. Unlike the Soraka today, she used
a Soraka que tacava estrelinha do céu, mano, era mó roubado no mid.
To be able to actually give mana to her allies with her E ability Infuse. Additionally, she could still silence enemies, and it wasn't even an AoE, it was just a straight up point and click. What's even crazier is that in the really early days, Soraka could actually give mana to herself, making her completely self-sufficient in the area where she basically struggled most. Plus, if for some reason she actually did still somehow run out of mana, she could always just pick up a mana potion.
Você podia escolher, não é? O E, ou você dava silence no cara, como ele fez ali, ele clicou no cara e deu silence, ou você dava mana pra si mesmo, não era?
Too, because that was also a thing back then. And on top of all that, her Q was basically an AoE point and click, making her actually pretty crazy in lane 2. There was even a time she could heal herself as well along with minions. I mean, just picture playing with a Soraka player today that hits every single Q, every single E, and never runs out of mana and was also self-sustaining. You know, basically me whenever I play Soraka today, but for other people, it'd be pretty crazy. I think it's given that almost all old League of Legends players remember the old League of Legends client.
Oh, esse client é o que eu sempre falo pra vocês, rapaziada. Olha esse client aqui, mano.
Because it was so...
Isso aqui é a definição do feio mais funcional. O cliente de hoje, ele tem uma aparência legal, uma aparência bonita, mas olha esse cliente antigo, rapaziada. Quando você clicava, o bagulho respondia, não ficava dando load em 3.000 anos. E ainda tinha essa parada que você conseguia dar spectate através do client em todas as partidas do Raielo, cara.
Almost all old League of Legends players remember the old League of Legends client because it was so nostalgic. But do you remember Bug Splat? It was basically just the crash notification that tended to happen at the worst times, even in professional games.
Use that package to escape though. I mean, yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, hello. Bug Splat!
Isso aqui a gente vai esquecer.
Oh no! Bug Splat! There it is!
Speaking of the old client though, there was actually a time where you had to wait in a queue to play League of Legends. So if you think League is annoying today, people were taking L's back then before the game even started. You basically just had to sit in a line to get into League. Now the waits were never super long, most of the time it was usually a few minutes, but still. That said, there was also a point where you could type in "there is no earth level" to secretly skip the line. I did mention that in one of my previous videos though. Also, no matter what you do, old players can't forget about the match fountain sound.
Não, moleque. Rapaziada, meu instinto de sobrevivência ativou. Eu já tô preparado pro combate.
Fountain sound.
Mano, pode vir. Vem tranquilo.
Additionally, the old client also had a stat screen which showed you things like your total kills, minions killed, damage dealt, averages. It was actually pretty cool and kind of sad that they got rid of this. More importantly than all of that might be how the roles were assigned back in the day. You see, there was a time where people didn't have the luxury of queuing up for specific roles. And instead...
Antes você tinha que saber jogar de tudo, mano. Porque, velho, você podia cair qualquer role. Até porque quem era o first pick era o cara que tinha mais elo.
They relied solely on how you entered into the game. Because of this, it was somewhat important to have some sort of ability to play every single role, because if you got last pick, there was a solid chance that you were going support or jungle. This is also where the phrase mid or feed became quite popular for the time for obvious reasons.
Nossa, mas que rostinho lindo você tem, hein? Pra ficar mais linda ainda, só se inscrevendo no canal, deixando o likezão, manda aquele comentário aqui embaixo e prossiga com o vídeo. vídeo.
This is more of a small one, but I think when people think of the old
Olha o Warwick antigo, que coisa horrenda. E olha o Red antigo também.
a lot of the times they think of the old Phantom Dancer icons because they were so common. On another random note, there was actually a time where there wasn't any limit on how many health potions you could buy at the start. So a lot of the times players...
Na Season 3, teve uma época, gente, que você começava com a poção de refil da época, que era mais cheatada que essa, porque ela dava vida e mana, e você ainda conseguia pegar, acho que 5 pots ou 6 pots. Ou você não começava com poção de refil e você começava com uma ward e 9 pots. Ou você não comprava ward e começava o jogo com 11 pots.
would just buy 9 or 10 health potions right out of the gate and have an insane amount of sustain in the early game. Similarly, there was also a time where there was no limit on how many wards you could buy either. This is probably one of the most popular blitz clips and glitches from back in the day.
Meu Deus. Era normal.
Rivaling it also probably has to be the Lee Sin kick drive-by.
É mesmo, né? A Pink Ward era invisível, Sered. Bem lembrado.
Speaking of leak clips, I feel like this is a bit less known, but the real OGs will remember the Golden Crocodile. This became Darian, aka Swag Lord's signature move by diving into the fountain and then going golden. After all, as they say, a Golden Crocodile...
Esse cara aqui, gente, esse Darian, era um top laner da Moscow 5 e, mano, ele me inspirou bastante.
...is the best crocodile. And it actually became so popular that Faker even did a tribute to it later. Alright, switching angles a bit, there was actually a time where timers didn't used to exist for objectives like Dragon or Baron. It's not really something we think about today.
É verdade, não tinha timer. Você acha que vocês apertavam tab e tinha tempo do Red, do Blue, do Arauto, da Larva, do Barão, do Dragão? Não. Quem anotava essas porra era o Jungle ou o suporte. Ficava lá, mano. Anotava tudo. Tinha que anotar tudo, senão você não era um jungle suporte no competitivo.
Hey, but back then, you had to mentally keep track of all of it because there was nothing to really remind you that they were spawning. There were no countdowns, there were no messages. It was basically just pure awareness and...
Isso, inclusive, ele falava bastante o suporte. Tipo, os suportes geralmente tinham uma mecânica bem afetada por causa disso, porque eles tinham que ficar anotando coisa toda hora.
Might not seem super challenging, it was actually a lot harder than you thought just because there was always so much going on in the game. And it was just one more thing to remember. In lower elos, people even just straight up forgot about them too. And sometimes you could even sneak objectives if
e
you're
até campo, tipo, a galera anotava muito tempo de campo também. Aquâminas, né, que era Wraiths na época, especialmente porque elas eram um objetivo fácil de roubar, você tinha que anotar o tempo também. Se eu não me engano, era 1 minuto de respawn.
Only one who remembers.
Moving on,
there used to be a lot of game modes over the years, but one is a lot less known, and that was Nemesis Draft. This is where you actually picked the champion for the enemy to play instead of your own. Everything like the champion select would look normal, except for the fact that you were picking for the opposing team. In theory, it was actually a pretty fun twist to things, but it quickly turned into one of Riot's biggest game mode failures. That is, once they remembered the kind of obvious, which is people only want to play champions that they like and want to play. Because of this, the game mode only lasted 10 days in 2015 before being completely removed from the game. I do think it would be pretty fun if they could add this in for like custom games for friends or something. All that said, there have also been a lot of successful game modes over the years as well, like Twisted Treeline and Dominion, for example, both of which were successful game modes over the years as well, like Twisted Treeline and Dominion, for example, both of which were great game modes, but I won't fully cover them in this video because I actually already did in previous episodes, which you should check out here. That said, some of the things I didn't mention there are some of the forgotten game modes inside of the game mode. For example, the Dominion map was used to play a number of games outside of just Dominion, like Catch the Teemo, where both teams would have a Teemo and their Teemo would try and hide, and the first team to kill the other Teemo wins. There was also even Mario Kart that people played where they basically just raced around the map fighting through obstacles. Custom games like these with friends were actually surprisingly common back in the day before.
Pô, mas hoje em dia é mais legal porque a gente consegue fazer as brincadeiras no modo treino, né? Que a Riot finalmente liberou pra você botar quantas pessoas você quiser no modo treino ali, né? No máximo 10. E inclusive no Mylonzete a gente tem feito muita coisa legal.
Things got super sweaty like things are today. Anyways, this is a pretty simple one, but a lot of people don't remember that Riot used to actually give free skins for just following them on social media pages. For example, you could get a Tristana skin for just following Riot on Facebook.
Quem tem essa Tristana? Eu tenho.
A Garen skin for following them on Twitter, and an Alistar skin for just subbing to their YouTube. Did you know that up until 2016...
E a Ashe Breton? A Ashe Breton também não era dessa parada, não?
He actually had a report option to report people for being unskilled. However, Riot never actually used it, and instead it was more just a
Tu podia reportar o cara por ele ser ruim.
team mechanism for players. Still, if that is the case, I feel like they might as well just bring it back because, you know, why not? Next up, of course, is AP Master Yi. I feel like most people have at least heard about the glory days of AP Master Yi at some time or another. But long story short, back in 2012, Master Yi had an 100% AP ratio on his Q and also had another 100% AP ratio on his W. So if you had Q on cooldown, you could basically just keep swapping back and forth from Q and W and you just wouldn't die. At the same time, you'd also just blow people up because of how much damage he could do. In other words, he was just a bit of a pain in the ass to go up against. Maybe not as OP as Saber
Esse Master Yi e o Master Yi de Draktar, eles eram completamente anti-jogo.
Yi in 2015, but it's pretty close. All right, and lastly, we have some honorable video mentions. First up is Summoner Showcase. This is a throwback and was basically a little series that Riot
Mano, o nome dela era Nika Sour.
did to show off the community's art, hosted by
Nico
Nico
Sour.
if you remember who she is. Another throwback, of course, has to be the Dunk Squad. If you haven't seen this video, this is a piece of League of Legends history. Basically just 5 people running around on Donkey Champions while jamming to Space Jam. Then there was Civ HD's Juke City, where he basically just plays LeBlanc. Then,
Cara, esse maluco é antigo,
then
hein,
there was
velho?
Civ
Esse cara aqui, ele era da época do YouTube de LoL, quando eu nem assistia YouTube de LoL.
HD's Juke City, where he basically just plays LeBlanc. Then, of course, there's the Fast, who will always be a League of Legends legend. And a long time ago, there were even League of Legends parody music videos that were really popular.
Eu gostava da Irelia. Era paródia de música, só que versão LoL.
There were a bunch of other videos, obviously, like this, but these were some of the really popular ones back then. Anyways, that's all I got for now. Please consider subscribing if you...
E aí, você lembrava de todos? Você é um jogador raiz mesmo? Manda nos comentários se tinha algum que você não lembrava ou se tem algo que o cara deixou de fora que, né, precisava estar.